working through reconstruction this week is by way of kind of a surprise. And if you're easily grossed out and are eating, or if teeth gross you out and you're eating, you may not want to watch this right now. But it's not super gross, but I have a pretty high threshold for what grosses me out. So for me, it's not gross, but for you it might be. And if teeth is one of those things, then you may want to wait until you can try to not be grossed out. But or just skip this altogether. But for me, this week, well, really starting last week, I had a crown that came off, which was not that big of a deal. But I called my dentist. It was like the end of last week, and I knew that they would be closed, so I called this week. And like in my head, oh, this will be quick. It'll be a quick reconstruction, right? They'll just put the cement back on. It'll click right in there. We'll be good to go. So I didn't, it wasn't damaged. I didn't lose it. So I figured it would be pretty straightforward. So I get in there, and what they tell me was that there was decay. So I'm looking at the little crown that came off the tooth that looks like a perfectly white tooth. It looks fine to me. I mean, I'm not a dentist. To them, they could probably tell, but to me, it looked like a perfect little covering, and everything looked great. But underneath, there was all this decay. And the interesting thing to me is that I had a root canal years ago. So there would have been pain that would have identified that there was something wrong and that there was decay that needed to be cleaned out. But because I'd had the root canal, I couldn't feel it at all. So that was good. So I wasn't in pain, but it ended up, what I thought was the biggest problem was this coming off, and now I've got to go and get it put back on, was actually grace. It was actually a gift, because if that decay had been sitting there longer, it could have grown into the jawbone or gone into an infection, and that would have been a whole bigger problem. So, and I've got little kids, so fevers and feeling tired and the things that kind of usually will trigger an infection, they kind of come and go. So I wouldn't necessarily go oh, I probably have an infection underneath my tooth with this perfect little beautiful crown on top. So afterwards I kind of, went back, and really a couple days before the crown came off, I remember being there's a little gap there that I don't remember being there. So it could be that the little gap let something in that wasn't supposed to be there, and then that created decay, and then that grew, and then it grew enough to kind of take away the binding of the crown and the tooth, and then over time that just came off to reveal what was the real big problem, was the decay underneath. And it could have been that when the crown was placed, there was some decay that wasn't completely removed. But whatever the case may be, for me, the deconstruction was quick. I was eating fine. I took a bite. I was no longer fine. The crown was off. But what was happening underneath was a very slow process. And now the even further deconstructing, what's going on underneath, and what needs to be addressed by the dentist, and what needs to be addressed by the oral surgeon, and all of that. It's going to be a slow process. And then the reconstruction is going to be a slow process. But it really made me remember that there are often deep areas of decay, or of just darkness, or crud, or just things that are not good that I can't see. And it is a certain type of grace that will allow for these things to be revealed by a number of things. And sometimes they're painful, sometimes they're not painful. Sometimes they're just things that may seem to be completely unrelated. But to pursue answers and to pursue truth is how to finish the deconstruction and then be ready for the reconstruction. And then it kind of reminded me that, like, yes, sometimes a deconstruction process is quick and sometimes it's slow, but overall, the deconstruction that we undergo with our perfect teacher is gentle, and it isn't a demolition. It isn't a destroying. It might feel like it sometimes, but it isn't that. It's a brick by brick covering, unpeeling the onion, like whatever metaphor feels good to you. It's that. It's a slow uncovering of the root of the issue. And sometimes one root uncovers another root. I was having a conversation with a friend today who just has an old house, and that's what he said. He was like, it's like peeling the onion. Like, you go to address one problem and then you uncover two more that you didn't know were there. And sometimes that can feel disappointing, or it can feel discouraging, or like it's all for naught. But what I think is true, and what is encouraging, and that is, if you hadn't done the first thing, you would have never discovered the other two. And while you might think that everything was fine before, there were all these things deep down that you couldn't see, that left untouched by light and left unaddressed could have and would have presented a bigger problem down the road. So I'm grateful the crown came off. I'm grateful that the decay was discovered. I'm grateful that in 1 week I have to have surgery to have a tooth removed. And then figure out what I'm going to do next to reconstruct, so that I put something in its place, so that what's left undone doesn't then create problems from the absence. So I think sometimes when the healing is done, the pain is relieved, the problem is gone, it's a lot easier to just move on and say, like, okay, that's it. I don't have to put anything in its place. I'm just going to move on. I'm going to avoid it. I'm going to ignore it. And for some things that might work, but for this, it doesn't, because there are other things affected. It's not, I think it's a second molar. It's not a first molar. So like there are two teeth beside it and there's one underneath it. And if I don't address it, then everything around it's going to start moving and changing. And there is a purpose behind what was there. What was there ended up not being good and needs to be taken out, but the purpose of something being there needs to be restored. So I'm grateful for the reconstruction process. I'm grateful for this reminder that sometimes it's quick, sometimes it's slow. Sometimes what I've reconstructed, what I've put in place, is actually covering up that there's still more deconstruction that needs to be done. And I think that that's always true of a cover-up. I think a cover-up is always, it's always maybe my attempt to like tie things up in a pretty little bow and say, okay, that's done, now on to something else. When really, I think the joy and the beauty of continuing on and continuing to grow is discovering that there will always be more to grow in. There will always be new light shined on new areas that I never knew were there or were beneath the obvious. And yeah, I hope it wasn't too gross, but I hope that if you're in the place where you thought you had one problem but you've discovered now it's 5, or you've just finished one thing and now you're having to jump right into another one, I hope you feel like you're not alone, that this is one of the most fulfilling and worth it things that you'll ever be on. And for me, a lot of you may already know this, but for me, the most important thing that I've learned is to ask God, what do you want me to know? And sometimes I'm really quick to isolate the problem, draw a conclusion, and put a little perfect crown over it to cover it. But sometimes, in His good grace, He lets that come off for me to see something that hasn't been addressed, that really needs the light of Christ to shine and to complete the deconstruction process before I put something else in its place. And for me, what I need to put in place is gratitude and worship of the only person worth worshiping, and that's Jesus Himself. And if you don't know Jesus, that's okay. I'm really glad you're here anyway. Something that I've been asking myself today is, a lot of Christians will say, if people aren't a follower of Jesus, then they're just wrong. Well, if they've never met Jesus and they've never had an encounter with Jesus or God, then how can they be not choosing it? And sometimes the image of Jesus we're giving, or the explanation or the metaphor or whatever in our own strength we're trying to convey, if it doesn't land, then maybe there's no decision to be made. Because if I say, hey, do you want this apple or this orange, but both of my hands are empty, then there's no choice. There's not a choice to make. But if I have an apple as an apple is supposed to be, and an orange as an orange is supposed to be, and ask someone to make a choice, then that's a choice. And so I think sometimes we put a whole lot of importance on what we say and what other people say, when the reality is what is unsaid and what is on the inside is something that we will never know. And so all I'm to do is just share that the most helpful and important thing that I've ever done is ask God, what do you want me to know? And He'll show me the decay, or He'll show me the cleaned, beautiful, white, whatever that He put in the place of something that He and I were able to deconstruct together, so that He in His righteousness could reconstruct something righteous in my life. And He doesn't need me to do that. He doesn't need me to do that for me. He doesn't need me to do that for you. He doesn't need me to do that for my kids. All He needs me to do is to keep asking and keep learning and telling people what He's teaching me. So for me, I really think He needs me to tell that to my kids, and they may be the only people that ever watch these, and they may never watch these. But in His goodness, if there's anybody else, even one person that He thinks might understand a little bit more of who He is and have the courage to ask Him, what do you want me to know? Then I'll be grateful. So if anybody's watching this, thanks. And I hope that deconstructing is a blessing of ultimate reconstruction for you, as it is for me. And I hope I didn't gross you out too much. But thanks for sticking with it. And I hope you have a good week.